Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would talk about this potential fight that might be upcoming between Mr. Tyson Fury and Mr. Anthony Joshua. From what I hear, the fight is very close to being signed. We'll see what happens. From the rumors that I hear, the only things that they have to settle on now, which is the thing that they've pretty much had to settle on for the past week, at least from what I hear, is a date and a venue. But from what I hear, they're getting very close to signing that off. The date apparently is going to be somewhere late July, and the venue apparently is going to be somewhere in Saudi Arabia, which, is pretty much what I predicted and a certain amount of other people predicted. It seemed like it was going there. But anyway, I was going to do an individual video talking about Anthony Joshua's chances in this fight when it comes down to it, because I think that really, in all reality, when you take a look at this fight, I do believe that this is a 50-50 fight. And the reason why I think that it's important to disclaim that is because ever since Anthony Joshua's losses to Mr. Andrew Ruiz, or excuse me, ever since his one loss to Andrew Ruiz, and ever since, him fighting the way that he did against Andrew Ruiz in the rematch now, in my opinion, I thought that it was a great performance by Anthony Joshua. He very clearly dominated Andrew Ruiz. But of course, you maybe could argue that Anthony Joshua could have done a bit more in the Andrew Ruiz match, but he fought a smart fight. So I can't necessarily claim that it was a bad performance. But I thought that Anthony Joshua, once we seen him, after the Andrew Ruiz first fight, I thought that potentially he was never going to be the same fighter again. And I thought that in that Andrew Ruiz rematch, I thought that he was going to fight that way for really the rest of his career. But in that Kubrat Pulev fight, and Kubrat Pulev, of course, in my opinion, is not the fighter that Andrew Ruiz Jr. is, but Kubrat Pulev is still a pretty decent fighter. And the fact that Anthony Joshua was to look that phenomenal against the Kubrat Pulev, I thought was an amazing performance. I thought his defense really improved. I thought that his footwork improved. I thought that his head movement improved. But we're going to talk about that all in this fight. So I'm going to review a video by this one boxing channel named the IBFP. A couple people on my channel have told me about this channel. I do like this channel to a decent degree. I don't agree with everything that he says, but let's just say I agree with him certainly more than I would with the LDBC and new media channels. So I certainly don't think that he has the worst channel in the world. But he has been arguing a little bit more on Anthony Joshua's side than Tyson Fury's or Deontay Wilder's. But now, of course, he he doesn't really like Deontay Wilder that much at all, and I've been a major criticizer of Deontay Wilder as well, but it is what it is. Anyways, let's hear what he has to say.
Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Boxing News.
Fanboys, be advised, this video contains the absolute truth, may cause hurt feelings, and a need to thumbs down the video. Anthony Joshua is getting better, improving, growing, and Tyson Fury is not. Welcome to another edition of Undisputed Facts with the IBFP, and we break it down, huh?
Interesting. What I'll say is this. I believe that they've actually both improved. Anthony Joshua, when I seen him in that Kubrat Pulev fight, I thought he looked absolutely phenomenal. I expected him maybe to have a little bit of problems with Kubrat Pulev, maybe Kubrat Pulev to win a round or two. I can't really remember a round that I gave Kubrat Pulev in that fight. I can't really remember a single flush punch that Kubrat Pulev was able to land in that fight. Anthony Joshua's defense and his head movement was pretty damn decent in that fight. And the reason why, to me, that's an important adjustment is because Anthony Joshua has not always had the most elite head movement in the past. Sometimes you can argue that he's been a little bit robotic, but I thought he looked absolutely phenomenal in that Kubrat Pulev fight. He looked absolutely phenomenal. And the defense was better too. The only thing I would say about Anthony Joshua is sometimes I think he leaves his hands down a little bit too long on the inside, or sometimes needs to put a hand up on the inside when he throws certain combinations or certain punches on the inside. Because sometimes he'll throw the combinations for a little bit too long, or he doesn't put a hand up and he'll get hit in return. That's kind of what happened against Andrew Ruiz in that first fight, because he wasn't watching out for certain punches. So, just to be careful, don't get too cocky with it. I don't think he'll do that against Tyson Fury, but to be honest with you, Tyson Fury, I don't think is the inside fighter that Anthony Joshua is. So that's going to be a very interesting fight, because Tyson Fury, when it comes down to it, I don't think that he's quite the inside fighter that Anthony Joshua is. I think that, if he's in trouble on the inside, he ties you up. But Anthony Joshua, he's actually a very good counterpuncher on the inside and on the outside. I'm going to be very interested to see how Tyson Fury handles that.
honestly and objectively as possible. And we start, with Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. Who these guys are. Anthony Joshua and Fury are both elite fighters. Both of these guys are in their physical prime. Both are world champions, and they're the best the heavyweight division has to offer. And that is the absolute truth. But when you look at both of these guys, you see only one of these guys is improving. Only one of these guys is growing. Only one of these guys is reaching new levels and new heights. And that man is Anthony Joshua. He's the only one out of those two that's actually doing. And you can look at his resume as the proof behind this. I mean, if you look at it, he's fought Vladimir Klitschko, Joseph Parker, Kubrat Pulev, Andy Ruiz, Dillian White, and
Anthony Joshua's resume for the heavyweight division is absolutely incredible. When you talk about him, Deontay Wilder, and Tyson Fury, you certainly can argue that he has the best resume out of all of them. There really is no argument there. Well, at least a better resume than Deontay Wilder. And then Tyson Fury is debatable because even though Tyson Fury does not have as many top contenders on his resume as Anthony Joshua does, he does have 2 A+ wins, one over Vladimir Klitschko when he was a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter, and one over Deontay Wilder where he would have been top 20 on my pound-for-pound list. Because I don't think Deontay Wilder ever truly deserved to be top 10, but, it is what it is.
Alexander Povetkin. All of these guys are challenging, difficult, top-tier fighters. All of these guys have a difficult and different style. He's beaten the most diverse stylistic group in the heavyweight division, and he literally has the best and most complete.
And when I take a look at these fights, the Vladimir Klitschko fight was very tough. A certain amount of Deontay Wilder fans especially love to say that Anthony Joshua fought him when he was way too old. But once again, you catch Deontay Wilder fans talking about Luis Ortiz, they won't say that same thing. So it is what it is. I thought that Anthony Joshua showed a hell of a lot of heart in that fight. I thought he showed a hell of a lot of grit in that fight to really come back the way that he did. Because when I watched those middle rounds, I thought Anthony Joshua really was going to get stopped in that fight. So, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So, it is what it is. Very impressive that he was able to come back. And Anthony Joshua had a very great close fight with Vladimir Klitschko, but he was pulling out in the end. And, of course, he ended up knocking him out. The Joseph Parker fight, and the Joseph Parker fan base is not going to be very big with me because, once again, I don't have as high of an opinion of Joseph Parker as I do others. But Joseph Parker for the heavyweight division, don't get me wrong, I do understand that he is talented. I think that he's actually a very decent athlete, but I do think that he needs to improve on his skill set a little bit. I don't think that he ever has had the skill set of some of these other fighters on the list, and a certain amount of people may disagree, but there is no debate about it. Joseph Parker was one big threat at the time when Anthony Joshua fought him. Now, in my opinion, when I watched the fight, I didn't think the fight was close. I'm sure the Joseph Parker fan base is going to disagree with that. I think the last time I watched it, because I only watched that fight once or twice, I think I scored the fight like 9-3. And of course, a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but that's just the way that I scored it. I would have to watch it again. But I just don't think Joseph Parker was able to do enough in that fight. So it is what it is. The Pulev fight, I thought he looked absolutely amazing in that fight. That's the best fight that I've ever seen Anthony Joshua fight in. And I don't think that it was just the quality of opponent that he was facing, because Pulev, I don't think he's as good as any of these other contenders on the list. But when it comes down to it, he's still a decently talented fighter. Anthony Joshua, I just seen clear improvements in that fight. The Ruiz fight, obviously the first fight didn't go very well for him. The rematch, I thought he looked pretty good. I still seen some faults in the rematch, though. Once again, the Pulev fight, he looked amazing. The Dillian White fight, now to be fair, he didn't face Dillian White when he was really a top 10 guy. They were both on the come up when he fought him, but Dillian White still is a very decently talented fighter. And you still have to count that because Dillian White overall has become a very decent fighter at this point in time in his career. Dillian White is probably the best contender, of course, besides Vladimir Klitschko, out of all these guys. Maybe Andrew Ruiz if you're going to argue that, but Dillian White has a better resume than Andrew Ruiz, so it is what it is. And Povetkin, that's actually the fight when you take a look at this, out of all the fights that Anthony Joshua won, that might actually be a fight to where he looked the least impressive to me. He was getting caught a little bit early. There was even a couple of times where maybe you can argue that he was a bit stunned. That Anthony Joshua, in my opinion, would not do very well against the Tyson Fury. But he has made improvements. I will agree with that.
Resume in the heavyweight division. This is not what I think. This is not how I feel. These are facts. But then when you turn and look at Tyson Fury, you notice his last 6 fights, well, they leave a lot to be desired. I mean, Sefer Safiri, Francisco Pianetta, Deontay Wilder, Tom Schwartz, Otto Wallin, and then Deontay Wilder again. None of these fighters had any elite skills that would allow them to truly challenge Tyson Fury.
Well, let me tell you this, and I agree with a certain amount of what the IBFP is saying, but I do have to give some credit to Deontay Wilder. Is Deontay Wilder an A-class skilled boxer? He's not an A-class skilled boxer, but he is a very decent athlete when it comes down to it. He is a very decent athlete. In my opinion, he is an A-grade fighter, and I understand that he does not have A-class boxing skills, but what he does have is A-grade athleticism. So even if Deontay Wilder, even if you were to put him at a C-class skill set, the fact that he has A-class athleticism is something to behold. And combined with whatever boxing skills he has, combined with the fact that he can knock you out with one punch, I mean, it makes him that big of a threat. So Tyson Fury, in my opinion, when you count that Deontay Wilder win, you have to count that as an A-class win. That is a very impressive win, So it is what it is. And in my opinion, Tyson Fury, ever since he's went to the Kronk Gym, I thought he looked technically, now of course, obviously he looked better in the rematch against Deontay Wilder, but I still thought Tyson Fury looked pretty damn good in the first fight against Deontay Wilder. I thought that he clearly won that fight. I thought that the draw was one of the worst decisions I've personally ever seen. And that's not the only one, because boxing might be the most crooked sport that I've seen out there. But when it comes down to it, I have seen Tyson Fury improve a little bit. I've seen him improve overall ever since that first Deontay Wilder fight. I've seen him improve ever since he's went to the Kronk Gym. I think the Kronk Gym has actually made him a fresher and a more sharper fighter. That's just the way that I see it.
They are all C and D level fighters, and they have never had the ability to challenge Tyson Fury in any significant way. But then when you turn around and you look at Anthony Joshua, you realize his last 6 fights were level above Tyson Fury's last 6 fights.
Well, I do somewhat agree with that, and that's why I never understood this narrative where Anthony Joshua was avoiding all these fighters. It was always Deontay Wilder that was not facing a certain amount of these top contenders. I mean, Deontay Wilder, when it came down to it, I'm not sure if he was even excited about the idea of facing a Dillian White. Anthony Joshua, once again, there's a reason why Anthony Joshua had 3 or 4 belts around his waist and why Deontay Wilder had 1 belt around his. It's because he was holding that belt hostage. And he picked Tyson Fury. I'll give him credit. He picked Tyson Fury in the rematch. Some people would say, obviously, Tyson Fury was going to be tough for him. But Tyson Fury did not look overly impressive before that rematch. And a lot of people thought that Tyson Fury was clearly going to get knocked out in that first fight against Deontay Wilder, because let's admit, Tyson Fury, he had a bunch of problems going on with him. All right, he was not favored to win that fight. So that's the bottom line.
Seen AJ grow and evolve over those last 6 fights, and he's become a much more complete fighter who has proven to be an elite puncher, a great boxer, a good counter puncher, has high ring IQ, and perfected an elite jab. And all of this is because he challenged himself by facing different styles and consistently facing top-level competition again and again to accurately gauge his growth. The same cannot be said for Tyson Fury. He has not been consistently challenging himself. He even attempted to face his old sparring partner, Ajit Kabial, in what would have been another cherry-picked fight. At the end of the day, one guy is intent on facing top competition, difficult stylistic matchups, and another guy is not. And if you disagree with me...
If Anthony Joshua ends up defeating Tyson Fury, he's probably going to go down as the greatest heavyweight of the past 10 years. That includes even over Vladimir Klitschko, because Vladimir Klitschko was not able to beat Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury. I believe that he got completely dominated against Tyson Fury. I believe that Tyson Fury completely outclassed him. Now, of course, obviously, Tyson Fury wasn't landing a whole lot on Vladimir Klitschko. It's not like it was like a Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder fight, but he still clearly outpointed him. So that's the way that I see it. But when it comes down to it, man, if Anthony Joshua wins this fight, that's going to be a huge win, because when you also look at his resume against the talented fighters that he's faced today, I mean, Dillian White, Joseph Parker, Alexander Povetkin, Andrew Ruiz, Kubrat Pulev, some of these guys, not A-class talent, I guess, but like Kubrat Pulev, but, I think that that's still a pretty damn great resume. So, Anthony Joshua, once again, when we talk about the most elite heavyweights of the past just over 10 years, I think that there's three for sure heavyweights that are in that pack. I think that Vladimir Klitschko is in that pack. I think that Tyson Fury is in that pack. And I think that Anthony Joshua is in that pack. When you take a look at their accomplishments, their resumes, yada, 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 the only fighter that might possibly be entered out of that pack would be Deontay Wilder. Because right now I have an elite four. But Deontay Wilder could very easily get entered out of that pack if he were to lose to some of these top contenders. Because let me tell you something, and I know that I'm not overly impressed with Joseph Parker like some other people, but a Joseph Parker versus Deontay Wilder fight, that'd be a tough fight. Joseph Parker might actually have the type of style to beat a Deontay Wilder because he's very decently fast, he's decently strong, he moves around a lot. Deontay Wilder may not like that type of style. And Joseph Parker, even though he does not defend extremely well, I would not say that he is the easiest to hit. So that's the thing about Joseph Parker. So that'd be a very interesting fight. The Dillian White fight I think would be interesting. An Andrew Ruiz fight. Now if Deontay Wilder, if he faces those top contenders and all of a sudden is not able to beat them, that's when we know that Deontay Wilder is not an A-class fighter.
Ask yourself this question: how can you improve with no challenge? It doesn't make sense. In Tyson Fury's last 6 fights, who had the ability to challenge his skill set? Tom Schwartz? Otto Wallin? Deontay Wilder? None of these guys are in A-level fighters with the skill to match.
Well, I think Deontay Wilder is an A-level fighter, but he does not have an A-level skill set. And there are certain fighters that are like that, so... But the bottom line is this: Deontay Wilder is an A-class level win in my opinion, and I understand that Deontay Wilder does not have A-class boxing skills. But when you talk about the little bit of skills that he does have and the athleticism that he has, the fact that Tyson Fury was able to dominate him the way that he did in that rematch was absolutely phenomenal.
Of these guys would be food for fighters like Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz, Dillian White, Oslander Usyk, and even Michael Hunter. Deontay Wilder is actually the worst skilled fighter in boxing today, period. The absolute worst.
Ouch. What I'll say is this: Deontay Wilder, he has some boxing skills, but not very many. And, a certain amount of people, of course, would disagree with that, especially the Wilder fanboys. But what I'll say is this: Deontay Wilder, he probably even has a C-class skill set. I'm not even sure if he has a B-class skill set. But his athleticism is A+. So that's what makes him such a threat.
Garbage truck juice. Yet this is the fight that people rate Fury as the most skilled because he dominated a guy who couldn't even defend himself. A guy who couldn't even fight.
What I'll say is this, man. You can debate either Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua as the most skilled, because let me tell you something. Anthony Joshua is going to be the most skilled opponent, in my opinion, that Tyson Fury has ever faced. And once again, a certain amount of people would disagree. I don't think most people would disagree that he's more skilled than Deontay Wilder. But in my opinion, Anthony Joshua is even more skilled than a Klitschko was. And a certain amount of people, once again, can disagree with that. Anthony Joshua is no joke. Anthony Joshua, once again, I'm going to be very interested to see how Tyson Fury handles that fight. Because Tyson Fury, he is a great fighter, but Anthony Joshua is good on the inside. He's a great counterpuncher. Got great power in both hands. Not bad speed. And he's improved on some things. I'm going to be extremely interested to see what Tyson Fury does in that fight.
His way out of a cardboard box. That does not make you a beast by beating an incompetent fighter. Let's just be real about it. It makes zero sense to rate him that highly when Wilder has no significant skills and loses rounds consistently to cab drivers. You can't gauge Fury's development and skill level as a fighter by him blowing out an unskilled, flawed fighter like Deontay Wilder.
Well, one thing I'll say is this: Deontay Wilder did lose certain rounds to quote-unquote cab drivers like Artur Spiltzka and a couple of other fighters, Gerald Washington. But let me tell you something. Deontay Wilder did somewhat improve as a fighter a little bit, just a little bit, not by much. But when you take a look at his fights against Dominic Breazeale and a couple of those other guys, he was starting to time his right hand a little bit better. He was starting to become even more dangerous than he had been previously. So Deontay Wilder was starting to time things a little bit better. Now, of course, in the Luis Ortiz rematch, he pretty much was losing every single round until he knocked out Luis Ortiz. I believe it was in the 7th round. But the problem with Luis Ortiz is that even though he's a very decently skilled fighter, he just does not have the stamina to really compete with Wilder, a fighter like Wilder or an Anthony Joshua or one of these guys, if he probably does not stop them within the first half of the fight. Because Luis Ortiz, he just gets too lackadaisical. He leaves himself too open after a while. And overall, he just does not throw enough out of the first half of the fight in these big fights.
And other guys like Otto Wallin, Tom Schwartz, Cephas Safiri, Francisco Pianetta. These guys are not an accurate reflection of how good or bad Tyson Fury is. These guys are levels below the competition that Anthony Joshua has been facing. And that's not a...
I'm actually going to be very interested to see how good Otto Wallin is. I just seen him dominate Dominic Brazil, and I've been telling these Deontay Wilder fanboys this for a very long time. The majority of Deontay Wilder's opponents that he has faced in his career have not been that damn good. It is what it is. Dominic Brazil was not that damn good. A very one-dimensional fighter. Otto Wallin's got some skills to him. He's got actually some pretty decent skills to him. The first time I heard of him was in the Tyson Fury fight, where he actually gave Tyson Fury a hell of a time. Obviously, I still think Tyson Fury won that fight, but that fight, Fury's lucky that fight wasn't stopped. Because he did have a big cut, as you can see right there. But when it comes down to it, Otto Wallin, he's got some skills to him. He has a very good potential of becoming a top 10 fighter in the heavyweight division. I would love to see him personally against, say, now from what I'm hearing, he might fight Dillian White next. That's a pretty interesting fight. I'd bet on Dillian White to win that one. But Otto Wallin, he has a chance. I'm trying to think who else I'd love to see him fight Joe Joyce, even a Daniel Dubois, because I think Daniel Dubois needs some work. I've never been overly impressed with Daniel Dubois like some other people have been. I think that he does not have very good movement. And I'm not sure how great of a fighter he's going to be after the Joe Joyce loss, so we'll see. But when it comes down to it, man, very interesting fighter, Otto Wallin. I think that he's a very, very good fighter. Underrated skill set.
Feeling, that's not what I think. That's not my opinion. Those are facts. And any fight with Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury would be a great fight. Both guys bring different things to the table. I would personally favor Anthony Joshua in any fight with Fury based on his ability to win.
That's interesting. Right now, I have to favor Fury by a little bit, just because I think that he has been more dominant against those A+ fighters. But I can see where you're coming from, because Anthony Joshua, you could maybe even argue, has a little bit more to his game than a Tyson Fury, but we're really going to have to see what Tyson Fury pulls out of his hat in this fight.
Any fight in multiple ways. He has elite power, which is also an X factor and could end any fight at any moment with one punch. But Tyson Fury has a great chance to win a potential fight as well. But, you realize he is still an elite fighter. But the only fighter that has proven consistently to still be improving, to still be growing, and to still consistently be getting better is Anthony Joshua. Because men lie, women lie, but the facts don't lie.
Very interesting video. I don't completely disagree with everything that he said, with things here and there. But when it comes down to it, I think that was a pretty decent video. I usually review videos with channels that I usually tend to disagree with, but I usually somewhat agree with what the IBFP says. But when it comes down to it, I do believe Tyson Fury has improved somewhat as a fighter. What I'm going to say is this: Anthony Joshua is going to be the most dangerous test that Tyson Fury has had to date. And if he's able to get past him dominantly, I think that is going to be a very impressive performance. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, that was my little reaction video. Hopefully y'all enjoyed. And I'll talk to y'all later.